Shut up and sit down.
Hello, Phantoms fans. Welcome to the Dump and Chase podcast. I'm Sam Olmstead.
And I'm Justin Irwin.
Let's do it.
And here we go. Welcome to episode 1 of the Dump and Chase podcast. I am Sam, not to be confused with that movie starring Sean Penn. And with me is the founder, the writer, the videographer for hockeyfan.com, Justin. Justin, are you ready for this?
I am ready.
All right, so just a quick little background on the two of us. Justin, you have been a season ticket holder for how many years now?
7.
7 years. This is finishing up my 3rd season as a season ticket holder. Now we both are hunkered down front of Section 222. How is it usually describe yourself if you're telling someone to seek you out?
Tall, skinny, white guy, usually holding a cell phone recording the game.
Bald. You forgot to mention bald.
Well, I usually have a hat on, unless somebody has scored 3 goals.
Well, see, now that's how I have to tell people how to find me, to look for the reflection in the back of your head. There I am.
Ah, okay. Well, yes, I am usually pretty clean-shaven.
Make it easy on everyone else. Just real quick, what made you want to do hockeyfan.com? The recaps, the previews, all that kind of stuff, keeping tabs on the team.
Back at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of press about the Phantoms. I had seen similar things done for other teams. I figured we just needed somebody with an impartial view, tell you the good and the bad sometimes. So I just went with it.
Okay, so jumping into this here, we're going to catch up from the beginning of the season to where we are now. The start of the season, the same story as the last 2 seasons. Complete goalie turnover. We finished last year with Ivan Prosvetev and Wilder Peters. They both moved on to greener pastures. We start the season with John Moore and Justin Evanson, and safe to say that did not work out too well.
That is very safe to say. There wasn't a whole lot of competition between the two, it seems, and that just kind of led to complacency in the net, and it wasn't getting the job done.
Another big story of the offseason was the return of Brett Murray. Brett Murray was with the team about 2 seasons ago, played about half the year, and right about the Christmas break, he left, took off to Penn State. Safe to say, Penn State didn't work out for him at all. Now, Brett Murray is a 4th-round draft pick of the Buffalo Sabres in 2016, but at Penn State, over the course of 33 games over 2 seasons, 1 goal, 6 assists. So extremely safe to say that just Penn State was not agreeing with him much. Came back to the USHL, came back to the Phantoms. What did you think about that as far as what happened to him at Penn State?
Yeah, he just did not seem to mature at Penn State. His performance was pretty much unnoticeable, and I guess he decided to come back to the USHL. Well, he found another university, Miami of Ohio, that would probably be better suited for him.
For his sake, I would hope so. I mean, as talented a player as he is.
I hope for their sake he does do better there than at
absolutely.
Penn State.
Okay, so the season starts off horribly. Phantom started the season, first 6 games, 0-5-0-1. Just nothing went right that first probably month of the season or so. In terms of the start to previous seasons, where would you rank the beginning of this season?
It is the worst start that we've had. I had the numbers, but yeah, it was by far our worst. Even worse than 2013-2014, which is amongst the worst hockey I've ever seen at this level, or maybe any level. This year, though, at least we managed to not continue to play at that level the whole season.
Yeah, that October overall was really rough. If it wasn't for us catching Dubuque early in the season, I think we would have came out of October completely winless. Another story early on in the season, which certainly didn't help, defensive injuries, Steve Holtz, Aiden Gallagher. I mean, how much, with those two being out of the lineup for as long as they were, I mean, to you, how much did that impact the defensive lineup?
Holtz is a returning defenseman coming back from last year. Guys like that are extremely important early in the season. Holtz is a defensive defenseman. We had a guy, Gianfranco Casaro, who's more of an offensive guy. So losing Holtz early in the season like that was pretty big. And having Aiden Gallagher out as well, kind of cut into the depth at the position.
Now, not only did we start the season with a complete overhaul of the goalie position, it kind of led into, due to the play of Moore, Evanson really didn't even play that much to start the season. We went into a game of goalie musical chairs almost. To start with, they brought in Christian Stover in a trade from Cedar Rapids. Now, you kind of classified this as a goalie dump on the part of Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, they had a goalie who was really doing well. Stover is expected to go to college next year, so they wanted to bring a younger goalie into the system. So they made a quick trade with the Phantoms, and I think both teams benefited from that.
So then at that point, Vinny Purpura was brought in a trade with Omaha. So then we ended up with this kind of strange 3-goalie rotation. I seem to remember a 3-game series with Chicago where like each night it was 2 different goaltenders in the lineup.
I think they were just trying to stir the pot, see if either Stover or Moore were going to respond to a veteran being brought in. I think they knew Purpura was not going to stick around. So it was just basically to see how these guys would react with a little bit more competition.
Now, at the end of the day, Purpura was not even with the team that long. He ended up taking off to Boston University. And then, if I remember correctly, it was not long after that when John Moore was traded to Omaha.
That seems about the timeline, yeah.
And then the final piece of this goalie puzzle was Chad Veltri, who had been dropped by Sioux Falls. We picked up on waivers. At that point, you kind of had a back and forth between Chad Veltri and Christian Stover, with neither one really kind of separating themselves from the other until more recently. As far as the way the season has gone, how big do you think the pickup of Chad Veltri was?
At this point, it looks huge. Before that, like you said, there was no real clear-cut number one goaltender. I think even Christian Stover has picked his game up since Veltri has come in and given him a little bit of competition for that number one spot. So I think in the long run that even if Veltri isn't the number one goalie going down the stretch, which it looks like he is, it still has done its job.
Mm-hmm. And then at the time we traded for Purpura, there was also another trade at the same time with Chicago, not a goaltender, and on name value alone, not what you thought in the beginning, but that was the acquisition of Matthew Barnaby Jr., which you hear that name and it conjures images that once you saw Barnaby Jr. play, didn't really line up with what you saw from his father and his time in the NHL.
No, and that is probably for the best.
Yeah.
I loved watching his dad play, but it was more for theatrical value, and I don't think that's something we really need today.
Which is also something you don't really see in the game anymore anyways.
You'll occasionally have a guy, but in this day and age, you need the skill to back it up.
Yeah.
So...
Now, after the Phantoms had played about a third of the season, a pattern started to form with the team. As goes Brett Murray, does go the team. First 18 games of the season looked horrible for the Phantoms. Brett Murray in those first 18 games, only 6 goals. The next 14 games, 14 goals. And at the same time, the Phantoms offense seemingly altogether kind of picked it up. Just a complete turnaround, kind of hiding the deficiencies of the play of the goalies at the time, kind of letting the team get away with that. What did you see, Brett Murray at the beginning of the season compared to kind of that turnaround a third of the way through?
Beginning of the season, he kind of looked like a stumbling moose on the ice. Now he seems to be a lot more confident, seems to have the USHL game back, not wearing a face cage. he is the immovable object that we expect him to be.
And that's a thing right there. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody knock him off his feet?
Less times than I saw him trip over them at the beginning of the season.
Now, when you make the reference to the stumbling moose, you're not just saying that because he's Canadian.
No, that is not a that is not a racist stereotype.
No, I don't want to get complaints. I know they'll be very politely written, but now something we had seen off and on from the beginning of the season was what came to be known, actually by you first, I want to make sure you get the credit on that, was the 3M line, which was Murray, Malone, and McEachran. As for people that don't know, McEachran is not the son of former NHL player Sean McEachran, different spelling of the last name. I've heard that so many times this season, just want to correct it now. But, I mean, they went through a couple different versions of it. You would see Abate centering the line before they, bumped him down to second and third line play, which seemed to suit him just fine. And then kind of the place that the 3M line really shined was on the power play. To you, what is it about the 3M line, the three of them working together, that once it clicked, just kind of took over the league?
Balance. You got Murray, who is big, can park in front of the net, maybe not the greatest hands, but good enough. Jack Malone has really started to shine. He's strong, he's fast, and McEachran, he has a great shot, really dangerous from anywhere on the ice, sharp angles, accurate from the point, so really a good balance.
Now, what was it about the Phantoms power play that you saw from the beginning of the season compared to later on in the season? To me, it seemed like it was a lot of dump the puck into the zone, but only send maybe one or two guys after it, leaving everyone else at the blue line just kind of hanging out. I mean, do you think them getting more aggressive on the power play, I mean, was that the biggest key to you to kind of turning it around?
Definitely the biggest key. I also think their passing has become a lot more purposeful.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just throwing the puck around. But yeah, getting in and getting on the puck is definitely an improvement over dumping it in and hoping that they turn it over at the blue line.
Now, something in that is Matthew Barnaby. I had said to you before, especially last year, we really did not have somebody who could carry the puck through the neutral zone, consistently, reliably carry it through the neutral zone. That was something we lacked last year. That was something we had with Alec Mihalik a couple years ago. I mean, Matthew Barnaby, he doesn't show up on the stat sheet all the time, but it just seems to be the little things that he does, the fact that he will not give up on plays no matter what. And again, going back to the comparison of his father, I mean, what was that like for you, kind of seeing that in his game when you kind of have this idea in your head of what a Barnaby should be on the ice?
It definitely took a little bit of adjustment. I've noticed he distributes the puck very well. He is definitely not afraid to shoot it himself. So
now Barnaby, I think, is someone who, you have the goal scorer, you have the primary assist, you have the secondary assist. Something tells me that if you kept the stat for like the third assist, you would see Barnaby's name all over that for the bulk of the time he's been with the Phantoms.
Yeah, again, he distributes the puck very well. He will hit the guy coming into the zone. That might be a dump around after that gets touched a few times. The chip out of the zone. So really able to move the puck through all three zones.
Nah, there's some hockey purists that aren't the biggest fan of the secondary assist, so me suggesting a third assist, I'm pretty sure Don Cherry's head just exploded, and he didn't even hear this. That's how egregious of a of an idea I just had right there.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I hear the NBA announcers always talking about the hockey assist. That's not credited, but that guy really made the play.
Yeah. Whatever will make Don Cherry's head explode, I'm all for it. Now, of course, along with, everything going on with this turnaround, the goalie position finally, I guess you could say, settled down. They kind of, dug in with Stover and Veltri. Again, kind of back and forth evenly. Reached a point where Veltri kind of just completely took over. Over the 2 weekends, where it was, 3 shutouts in 4 games, kind of cemented his spot as the number 1 goalie. Along with the way the Phantoms offense has been playing, I mean, how huge was that, for Veltri to step up and get to where he is now?
That was definitely a huge lift, especially with us trying to chase down playoff positions. They had both had good games before that. They had both had not so good games. So with him kind of reaching his stride here as we're trying to knuckle down on the playoffs, that really helps stabilize the rest of the team and not, put so much pressure on the rest of the team to produce when maybe things aren't going that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, with all the issues with injuries to the defense over the season, we finally reached a point. Guys started getting healthy, with the exception of Steve Holtz. Guys who were not thought to be top defensemen at the beginning of the season having to step up their game. Are there any of the defensemen that really stand out to you as far as really kind of taking the baton and running with it with all the injuries?
Well, since he's been back from injury, Aiden Gallagher has really impressed me. The past 3 games, he's had a goal in each game, making a lot of really, really good plays in his own end. I think Nikolai Jensen has really kind of stepped his game up. Jason Dobé has played pretty decent down the stretch. So those 3 guys have really kind of picked their game up.
Okay, so now that we've gone back to the future, we're going to bring it up to the present day. And of course, the big story right now is over the last 10 games, the Youngstown Phantoms being the best team in the United States Hockey League. The last 10 games, Phantoms 9-0-0-1. That's out of 20 possible points. In the last 10 games, we picked up 19 of those. I mean, as far as moving up the standings, absolutely huge for the team. Clinched a playoff spot. And kind of in a 3-way battle right now with Chicago and Cedar Rapids. How do you see that going, given the team's schedules the rest of the season?
Too close to call. Chicago and Cedar Rapids, they have some tough games ahead of them, but we have 3 games against the USA under-18 team, which is absolutely destroying teams right now. And a pair of games against Sioux Falls, who they're doing really well right now out west. And a couple of games against the under-17 USA squad, which should be a lot easier, but we've been known to make mistakes, be goaded into mistakes against them, and we'll see how these go.
Now, that series the U18s had with Green Bay, that was, 12 goals they scored in both games?
Yes. They beat...
You would think they would have been better off with one of those vinyl goalies that you Velcro to the goalpost. I think that may have done a better job than the Gamblers goaltending in that series.
Yeah, well, I remember a game we played up in Plymouth. We were a goal behind them, and this was late in the second. By the end of the game, we lost 11-3, I believe. So they are one of the best teams I have ever seen come out of the National Team Developmental Program. They're scary.
Well, the silver lining for us would be that we'll see the U18s over this weekend, and that will be the last we see of them. With Team USA making the playoffs, if I remember correctly, it will be the U17s that will go on to the playoffs, as the U18s will be moving on to Worlds. So it's kind of that you want to get through this next weekend with them, and then thankfully with the playoffs coming, that's something we won't have to worry about.
Exactly. If we do lose, you hope you have a short memory and just be ready for Sioux Falls. If you manage to steal a couple of wins, that's a huge boost.
As far as this week is concerned, at the time of this recording, the school day game on Wednesday morning is yet to be played, so we don't know how that ended up. And then 2 games in Plymouth on Friday and Saturday, which you will be attending.
Yeah.
So enjoy the drive up there. And then they'll be back home Sunday to play again in Youngstown. I would like to know who was smoking what when they made up this schedule, because that's a little bit of a doozy right there.
Yeah, well, this seems to be a pattern. I've seen this in other seasons where we play a slew of games against USA towards the end of the season. There for several years, we started off the season against USA 3 or 4 consecutive seasons, and that was disastrous for us. So I guess if you're going to have to wrap the season up, at least it's short travel for both teams.
Now, on the injury front, which has kind of bitten the Phantoms all season long, I think it's safe to say, for the most part, the Phantoms are pretty healthy right now. The biggest story injury-wise would be Joey Abate. Haven't seen him back yet. What are you seeing on that front?
To the best of my knowledge, it's upper body. I do not think he will be back for the regular season. It's possible we'll see him in the playoffs. Maybe not. That's kind of a big loss for the Phantoms. He was kind of a solid second or third line center, depending on what you want to consider a second or third line. Definitely his line with Kuntar and Barnaby was effective at getting under opposing teams' skin, and Joey Abate was definitely one of those guys who gets under people's skin.
But at the same time, they were scoring.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were definitely scoring. Good chemistry with those guys. It's kind of interesting to see Matthew Barnaby Jr. not be the most abrasive guy on the line, and they added good scoring depth, so you couldn't really write them off as just out there to make you take a penalty.
And just a public service announcement to Matthew Barnaby Jr., this will be the last time that we reference the comparisons of yours and your father's game.
Yeah, when I write up the recaps or previews, I don't even put the junior in there because he is such a different player. It's not really, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so that is episode 1 in the books. We're going to wrap this up. Our next episode, definitely you'll be getting a recap of how this weekend went, how our playoff standings are looking, where we are there. Of course, fighting for that number 2 seed, get that bye in the first round. Now, if anybody out there wants to get a hold of us, Justin, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
On Facebook, YT Hockey Fan, YT Hockey PHAN, and Twitter at YT Hockey Fan, again PHAN. Game Time, Section 222, Row A.
And if you want to get a hold of me, I'm not giving you my Facebook. I don't even hardly use it anymore. You can look me up on Twitter at Dad3SRO. If you want to look through my timeline, there's really not much to it. Just me sharing things to win free stuff. That's pretty much what I do with Twitter. I'm a reader more than anything. But again, thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back next week for another episode of Dump and Chase. Justin, anything you want to add here at the end?
Nope.
Man, a few words. I like it. All right, thank you everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.